Now look, I'm quite aware, as I suppose the only elected representative albeit of a relatively minor council in the west of Ireland, that I'm in Dublin, and a lot of you will be wondering who the hell is this guy that has a name that sounds like he could be working for Cllr. The reality of it is, I can tell you a little bit about myself first, because you need to know who you're talking to. And my profession, I'm a practicing barrister in the west of Ireland. I'm also a farmer. Don't take out too much on those poor farmers. We're only part-time farmers down in the west. But I suppose it's important to mention that, because in the context of what I'm going to be talking to you about, particularly the EU budget, CAP forms such an integral part of the receipts that we get into Ireland that you have to talk about it in the context of farming. And it's something that for all too long the European Union has capitalised on in terms of trying to sell the project to us here in this country. But don't worry, I'm not going to go all John B. Keane and start talking about the field and doing my own cave impression or anything like that. But, you know, before I suppose I get on to the EU budget statistics, I was thinking a little bit about what the theme of what I talk to you about today would be. And there was a couple of us that were having a debate, I suppose, online in terms of the run-up into this conference. And there was a fantastic piece that appeared in the Irish Times edition not so long ago. It was the 20th of January by a playwright called Colin Murphy. And he talked about consensus and how in this country there is a presupposition that we have to have a consensus that we all buy in with. And if anybody deviates from that consensus, they're shot down very, very quickly. He talked about orthodoxy, and he quoted this particular passage from George Orwell. It's actually from Animal Farm. And he said that at any given moment, there is an orthodoxy, a body of ideas that it is assumed that all right-thinking people will accept without question. Anyone who challenges the prevailing orthodoxy finds himself silenced with surprising effectiveness. Now look, when this conference was announced, I had a very unusual experience. I was over on a family break in the UK for a few days, came in to my hotel on the afternoon of New Year's Eve to find my phone was lit up with messages. This journalist back in Ireland trying to contact me. So I rang him up, and about 10 seconds into the conversation, he said, "But what do you make of this senator in Ireland who's saying that this is a sham conference?" It took less than 2 weeks of announcing this conference for the orthodoxy to kick in and to try and silence opinion. And thank God. Thank God that you've all come out today and that we have this message to send back to that orthodoxy. And the message has to be loud and clear going out from here today. We are not going to be silenced anymore. I've been specifically asked to talk a little bit about the EU budget because there's a perception in this country that if you challenge the European Union, you're challenging vast amounts of money that are being levied into this country all of the time. They built our roads, they built our infrastructures, and that's the response that we get every time anyone criticises or raises an issue about the European Union. The reality can't be any further from the truth anymore. Since 2013, we are now a net contributor to the EU budget. You can see very clearly, 53 million have quickly risen to nearly $500 million last year. That's a significant amount of money that the Irish taxpayer is paying into Brussels, and some of it comes back through the form of CAP grants, through rural social schemes, but all of that originates from the Irish taxpayer. Every single cent. And when you talk, I've been heavily criticised in recent weeks by a certain large farming organisation for the stance that I've taken in terms of this, but there is very much a dearth of acknowledgement among that particular class that all of the monies that farmers are getting in this country are deriving effectively from Irish taxpayers. And that needs to go out there, that message needs to go out there very, very clearly from here today. The Department of Finance had said that by 2021, our annual contribution to the EU budget is going to go up by as much as up to 2.7 billion. Now, based on the current figures that are there, that means we're going to be paying in about 1.1 billion more per annum than we receive. That's a significant amount of money for a small state like Ireland to be paying in. But is it going to stop there? This is the real question. Because when the UK leave, the reality is there's going to be a 14 billion black hole. And where is that money going to come out of? Well, we know what the consensus among the European establishment is. It's looking for increased contributions from EU countries. Only yesterday, these countries, after a meeting in Brussels, agreed to increase their increase their EU contributions come 2020. Now, they're also supporting the EU's push to get increased contributions from smaller countries like Ireland and everyone else in the EU. And sure, why wouldn't they? Because they're all net recipients of EU funds. So we're now going to be paying more to plug that gap to give competitors in other countries an edge over our own domestic trade and industries. It's madness. Gunther Oettinger, the EU Finance Commissioner, he says, we believe that cuts, if we compare to the current approach, are going to be necessary over the next decade, but it is clear that with cuts alone it's not going to be enough to plug the Brexit gap. That's already signifying that not alone are we going to be dealing with cuts, we're going to be dealing with vastly increased contributions. I think only last week Brian Hayes, and I'll be getting on to him in a minute, was suggesting that it could be as much as 200 million per annum. Karina Cretu, who's the EU Commissioner for Social Policy, again, talking about CAP, she's saying, not only are we going to have a situation where increased contributions into the EU budget are going to come from individual member states, but we're also going to look for the member states themselves to introduce another subsidy to try and deal with the shortfall that's going to exist after the UK leaves. This is a dual process that the EU are now talking about. The whole point of subsidisation, the whole point of cap payments is slowly being eroded, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Brian Hayes, his response to this, you can read, it says effectively he wants more integration. I don't see any scenario where member states' budgetary contributions will remain the same after Brexit. When the UK formally leaves and stops paying the EU membership contributions, there will be a 13 billion budget hole which needs to be filled in one way or another. That was his take, only as recently as the 30th of January. I particularly love the last piece. Just as Ireland has received so much from the EU in monetary terms since 1973 when we joined, we should be ready to give back. Solidarity within the EU is a two-way street. 4 days before this, when Ireland's corporate tax regime was being criticised in Davos, the same politician had this to say. The comments made today simply reinforce the idea that a small number of big member states just want to shift corporate tax revenue from Ireland to keep their countries. The attacks on our tax system will keep coming, and we should continue to put up a strong front and resist these weird power grabs on our well-earned tax revenue. Well, if that's his idea of social cohesion and solidarity between member states, I'm not sure what we are expecting to see next, because